Okay, welcome guys and ladies. I'm Jeff Becker. This is my older father, Brian Becker. Appreciate you guys coming, and we're going to talk a lot about, but we also want to make this very engaging, applicable for all of us, because I think we have everything from principals and youth pastors to just, we want to understand your ministry and serve your ministry as the best we possibly can as well. So a little bit about myself. Again, I'm Jeff. It's interesting. I was telling my new friend over there that I think it was 7 years ago. I live out here in Scottsdale, and my dad said to me, he was out here for whatever it was, about 7 years ago. Hey, come over here. There's a free breakfast over here. And I walk into this, and there's hundreds of people gathered in this commons area, and I'm like, this is the coolest environment ever. So I've been going to church here. I've helped out with some school stuff here, basketball, speaking to kids. But it's funny how this community brought me here 7 years ago. So, but live out there, live out in Scottsdale, just a few minutes away. My wife, she's expecting our first. So talk about a father-son relationship, and so just trying to learn from all of us, trying to learn from him, and I work with. I'm a mental performance coach, so I work with mostly athletes, teams, professionals, but also executives on how the mindset affects performance. So it's been a very cool, exciting thing because I think there's so much things that we can relate to from a father-son relationship, but also from a coach-player, leader, manager, things like that as well. And so we'll get into all that stuff. But
And I'm Brian, and I'm the dad, obviously. You already told you that. And live in Chicago, married, grandpa. My work is self-employed as a person that works primarily with nonprofits on planning, board development, governance issues. I spent most of my adult life working for Lutheran nonprofits, and then left that world about 6 years ago and went to becoming self-employed. I worked for one of the Concordias. I worked for Wheat Ridge Ministries. Some of you might be familiar with Wheat Ridge. Changed name and mission and all that a number of years ago, but I was staff for a long time. And so, short version of how we ended up here. 20 years ago, our family situation was really dysfunctional. You'll hear bits and pieces of that. We're not here to tell you our life story, but it was bad. Lack of trust and love, and a lot of anger and tears in our family. And obviously, we're not there now. It's a different situation. And maybe half a dozen years ago, we thought maybe our story could be helpful, inspiring to other families that are really going through some tough times. And so 2 years ago, we published Tender Lines, a book, how to build relationships between fathers and sons. And it's partially our story, but partially research-based. And so this morning, we're going to, in our hour and a half here together, we want to frame what are some of the big issues. We want to take a look at what's it like in your ministry, and then take a look at formulas that we've seen that really help in terms of bringing healing and wholeness and that sort of thing. And hopefully you'll leave here with some really strong ideas about what you might do differently or reframe ministry. So you're welcome to ask questions at any time. You're welcome to disagree at any time. We're used to disagreements, and know that can be healthy. So. So some of you were talking to people beforehand. We're curious as to what, and some of you just walked in, so maybe let's skip over that one.
it's fine. We can do that.
Yeah.
Like we said, we want to make this as applicable to you guys as possible. You guys came here. We are a father-son. We have a story. We've done some research on father-son relationships, but what is the burning question for you? So in the next hour 15, when you guys leave here, what questions do you want answered? What do you guys have what draw you to this session today? And maybe what questions would you guys want answered by the end of this?
For me, just finding a better way to connect with my son, and just get out of this corrosive, constant battle, battle of the will type of thing. And, I don't know where he's at, but, I mean, I can't let him win, right? I'm the dad, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I gotta, I'm the one that says, hey, this is what we need to do, and you're the one that needs to do it, right? It can't be the other way around,
So you're-
regardless of how mad he gets.
So you're here for a very personal reason versus
Yeah.
like you're not shaping some ministry in your church.
No, well, I mean, my family ministry, my ministry.
That's right. Okay. Other reasons why you came today.
Yeah, I have a amazing story of generational breaking through, and it goes way back, many stories. But I'd like to see how I can replicate that more. I mean, I'm doing men's ministry and so on, men's discipleship, and because what we see is large numbers of older men that aren't that connected to their sons, and that's creating that disconnect that it shows up in the body of Christ too. So
Yeah.
Very good.
yeah, and I have this pivotal story in Autzen Stadium with Promise Keepers Conference with my dad and me, and him doing a blessing for me, a man who I'd never heard do an extemporaneous prayer in his life. It was Stu Weber that was speaking, and he's German, so that was big time for us. But it opened up a bunch of stuff, and I have 3 sons, and what we've developed and continue to develop, but trying to say, okay, what is it that worked for us? What is it that's different for other people? You know, you're trying to figure that out in men's ministry too.
Other people, why you came? Yeah.
Sharing with him earlier. So, my dad passed away when I was 13, and I was fortunate to have my grandpa in my life as a very, very positive role model. But as a principal, I see more and more students coming to school with single mom, as for example, and I'm very small. Like, I'm from a town of 240 people. Like, this is a small piece, but it's so prevalent even there. Like, a new family came, mom, 4 kids, all 4 kids have different last names, no male at all in their life. The little boy, I mean, whenever I'm at a basketball game or whatever, he's right there next to me. Just those things that those kids need, and it's so huge. And to be, not that, but just to be that positive male role model in their life, because they need it so bad, and they crave it.
I'm a psychologist, and I work with a lot of, young fathers, and really want to be a very strong, advocate for their role as a father, and to really push that. I just have one daughter myself, but I came from a family of, I have 3 brothers, and we have a very close relationship with our dad to this day, as much as we can, geographically see him. But I get to see him at least, 3 or 4 times a year. But we have a very, we have a very, very strong connection with him. But I know that in my work, I like to be a very strong advocate. And my studies was a lot about how boys, become men, in terms of that psychological formation. So this is always
I feel like we should switch roles. I feel like you should.
So, anyone else? Like, what makes this such an important topic for you?
Family ministry, and I've noticed that dads are not present in church. That I see, even though they're married and they're, I see moms bringing the kids to church, and dads out of the picture. And I want to see what I can do to make dads realize their role is as a spiritual parent.
Yeah.
That's who the kids are going to follow, not what mom did, but they're going to follow the dad. And so how can I tell the dads?
You're saying what we've been observing.
Yeah, there's a huge.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in our church as well.
Yeah. Well, you were going to share something?
So, my concern as a pastor is that I see calls in the church constantly for more biblical models of male which is not wrong, it's just, I don't think anybody's got a real good handle on what that would look like. I mean, if you picked up an Old Testament, a lot of those fathers are in dysfunctional relationships with their kids. Just because you're reading about a patriarch doesn't mean that they gave you a good example of what a father-son relationship should look like. A lot of times they're terrible examples.
Yeah. Well, yeah, oh, yeah, so, I mean,
And
that's.
so, and then Paul doesn't really talk a whole lot about it. Most of his family talks are about husbands and wives. And then just sort of assuming, I guess, that the kid thing will work itself out, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, you know, it sounds pious to say biblical models of male leadership in the church, but I don't think anybody actually knows what that means.
Yeah, as a kid, you know, I remember looking at the Sunday school, like the leaflets of David and thinking, wow, what an amazing guy. And then you read about like, holy cow, he got her pregnant and then he killed her husband. And then,
Well, his kids had a really messed up relationship
Oh, yeah.
with each other.
it is the whole life story of how, you know, God uses really, really wounded people to do God's work in the world, you know.
Right.
And how do we put that into a 21st century context? It's pretty complicated. And there's also mentioned the lack of male leadership. Then there are really strong women leaders, which is great. I look at your wife, and my daughter, my wife. They're strong women leaders. At the same time, they're like, well, there's a lot going on in the society today. When people talk about strong male leadership, they're like, oh, well, that's all that toxic stuff. So what does that mean? And for those of you who came in late, Jeff and I, a number of years ago, we published a book called Tender Lions. That title sort of paradox, you know, Tender Lions. And so as we talked and thought and wrote and talked some more about what this might look like, we're going, well, this is a huge paradox between how you want your kid to be tough and decisive and outspoken and listen, empathetic, loving, tender, so and know when to be one and when to be the other. And so it's not an easy task, and we're not perfect at it for sure. So, well, thanks for helping us frame. You know, it's a really important issue, and we all have that voice in the back of our head that, like our dads, you know, still telling us what's going on. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like the lady said here, I mean, one of the, I mean, I work at the church as a business manager. I lead Bible study. I have for years. You know, we go to church every Sunday. Kids have been in Bible study every Sunday. I mean, about as engaged as someone could be, and yet my son just rebels against it. Daughter seems to be doing fine. Son just rebels against it, to the point to where he was supposed to be confirmed this year, and he told me over this past summer that, well, I just don't believe in God anymore, and this and that. And he's getting all this external influence, and even trying to regulate social media and what he looks up. I was like, you just went and looked up things that told you what you wanted to hear, right? And it's just, and when I tried to explain to him, well, I don't want to hear it, or I don't want to, you know, it's just rebellion from beginning to end. And it's like, and I get super frustrated, you know, so I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I don't always act properly, you know. I mean, I try to restrain myself as best I can, but, you know, I can only get so much of the mouth back where, you know, before I blow my top. But the other thing is, socially, the whole society's changed. When I was growing up, my mom and dad both worked, both social workers, but growing up in the 70s and 80s, the whole community was on the same page. Everybody enforced the standard. Everybody enforced the rules. Everybody enforced the expectations and between the adults and the kids. I mean, that was across the board. Whereas now there's nothing. I mean, it's you couldn't go down the street and talk back to your friend's mouth. Yeah.
So, you want to interview? Or
Sure.
should we go on the next? Okay. Yeah.
We can do
Did
that.
you find somebody out there? Or no?
I did not. Anyone want to be interviewed? Quick little 5 questions.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you questions about your dad.
I love it. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
All right.
Your name is?
Steve Nicodemus,
Steve, and you're from where? Steve.
Hillsboro, Oregon.
All right.
All right. All right.
So let's do this just because we're not going to be here until noon. just, concise answers.
Sorry about that. I was-
It's okay, you're a storyteller, I know.
Shot clock. Okay, little preface of this, we have a bunch of interviews in the back of the book from positive, negative influences on father-son relationships from some of our friends.
So we interviewed some dads, to get their perspective, and so these are questions from the dad interview.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go through the questions and we'll just see where he goes. Describe your dad.
Faithful, quiet to a fault, hardworking, love language would be acts of service.
Looking back, what do you appreciate most about your dad?
Integrity. He'd stand for the truth. When he said something, you could count on it.
What does your dad do to contribute positively or negatively to being the man you are today?
Work ethic, and then the faithfulness. When I went through hard times, I thought back on him and my grandfather. They stuck it out.
Is there anything you wish he'd done differently?
Talk to me. I was the talker, and he would just shut down because we get too emotional for him. And when he did start to open up, I got to take care of him at the end of his life after Mom died. And but even all the last 30 years, was more and more opening up. It was great.
Sounds like you.
So, Jeff and I have done lots of interviews and workshops and things like that, and about half the time the interviews don't go like this. There's this big pause. Do you really want to hear about my dad?
Yeah, I always start every men's discipleship time with everybody, finish this thought. My relationship with my dad was, I had 3 guys that said, a joke. That wasn't good.
Yeah. And so there's, the story could be great, the story could be indifferent, the story could be terrible, abusive. What we're finding is, though, that has such a strong, formative, forming container of who the son is. By the way, daughter as well. The daughter as well. Observations from you about, in your own ministry experiences, your own family experience, about what you're seeing, maybe in your relationship with your dad, and why you become that person that you become. Anything?
My dad was a German, and Germans are hard workers, and my dad worked like to the bone. He was a farmer, so you saw him in the morning, but you didn't see him till 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So, and I know that's where I got my work ethic from.
Yeah. Anything else? So when Jeff and I started working on the book, it was about maybe 6 years ago, something like that. We're probably halfway through what we thought was going to be this book. We didn't know what the book was titled or whatever. And we would sit and spend long conversations about, like, if we could wind the clock back and do this over again, how would we do this in a better way? Because 20 years ago, we were in a really bad place. And so then we started doing research around, is our experience similar to what we see in other places? And one of the things that we saw over and over, one of the things we saw over and over again is that when the dad does not have a strong emotional connection to the kids, that's when risk factors pop up in their life. Now, mom's relationship is really important, but someone mentioned earlier that felt like the dad, they're going to follow, you mentioned that, tell me your name.
Nancy.
Nancy mentioned, that even though dad's not there, that influence is still really strong. And we've seen that over and over again too, that the dad influence is really, really important there. Let's go to the risk factor thing. So,
Yeah, so again, we had our own personal story. As we were writing the book, it was like, all right, well, we have a story and hopefully it can resonate with others. And then we started looking at the research and we were like, I think we have to tell this story. And we'll just start kind of with what's on the slide here of when fatherlessness is kind of the phrase that we used. But without a father that is absent, it relates to 71% of high school dropouts, 71% of teen pregnancies, 85% of children with behavior disorders, and 90% of homeless and runaway children. And well, through this, you can see that roughly, 20 million children live without their father. And we can also think of the ones that are physically present but emotionally absent as well. And so what when we kept looking through the research, it was more and more just that, at the bottom actually it says this, is that fatherlessness was categorized as a medical issue, it would be an epidemic. And so this is something that we took much more seriously, I think, than just our story. But unfortunately, it was just the tip of the iceberg of just these stats.
I'm from Chicago. Jeff grew up in Chicago. Urban, very urban. If any of you know Chicago, we're in a suburb called Maywood, which is really a suburb. It's more inner city in the feel of that. And so around us, we see the effects of poverty, drugs, gangs, prostitution. One of the guys we interviewed for the book, your friend that's the gospel, Todd
Delaney.
Todd Delaney, when we asked Todd to tell us about his dad and what was different about his dad, he said, my dad stayed.
Yeah.
He said, I looked down my block, and he says, on my block, my dad was the only one that was in the house. And so you think of the effects that that has also on the entire community. And the statistics are not getting better. Also, we don't have percentages, but gangs, drugs, alcohol, pornography.
I heard a statistic the other day, 90% of guys that are in long-term incarceration had no father present.
Right. It's very common. Sometimes some of you know who Richard Rohr is. So I'll come back to
Can
you.
you just go back to that slide real quick?
I'm sorry.
Can you just go back to that last slide? real quick?
Sure.
Here we go, I was just trying to put that.
Yeah.
Keep talking, here you go.
Okay. So some of you know who Richard Rohr is. A Catholic priest wrote a book called Falling Upward, which is really, some of you are nodding yes, really great book for people going through transitions in their life. Anyhow, he was a prison chaplain in Albuquerque for about a dozen years. And during that time, he said he met thousands of men, and he said, not one good dad story. And he said on Mother's Day, they would get flooded with requests for cards, and on Father's Day, no one asked for cards. No one asked for cards. Well, that's really telling, isn't it? They love their moms, but no relationship to their dad. A few more research things here. I'm not trying to build a case about the courts or whatever, but these are just some things that we saw in our research. So fathers being denied access due to courts unaware of the real statistics. So there's this sort of word out there that like moms are more nurturing, moms are more loving, so we should give moms custody of their children. Well, moms are nurturing and loving, and they're great, but dads need to have access. They need to have access to be able to have influence. And so, but there's these words that go out there, like, all used car salesmen can't be trusted. Well, some of them can be trusted, can't they? And you're like, no. I've never seen research on that, but that's out there. So this is something that's out there. Suicide rates, by the way, these are real, we didn't make any of this stuff up, all right? Suicide rates in unemployed males are double those with jobs. Incarceration, back to your point, population increased 700% in the last 40 years, 93% male, proportionally young, and the vast majority of them brown and black. U.S. has the highest rate of overweight males of all major countries. This is new, I just saw this in the last couple months. High school boys academically underperform girls in math, reading, and science in almost every zip code in the United States. And the only ones where they outperform tend to be very high income, and probably their dad is like pushing that kid down the road. And this is a number that continues to separate. Last year in the United States, everyone who applied to go to college, about 60% were female, about 40% were male, and that gap is widening. Colleges used to, when I was in college, they used to tilt the scale to try to get more females to go to college. Now colleges are tipping the scale to try to get more males to go to college. Females come into an environment like that, and they see so few males, and that's strange to them. Males come into an environment like that, and it's intimidating to them. They're like, I don't see myself there. And if they're not really strong, they don't want to be there.
We need a men's rights movement.
So, well, there's something to that. So how do you do that without like creating this big chasm?
Yeah.
Because I've had women who are like really feminist, strong, like it's not, I don't mind people being feminist. I mean, males are feminists too sometimes. That's okay. It's when you have this like this militant side to it. It's like, it's not your turn anymore. It's our turn now. So, 26% drop in earning power. Male detachment, it creates an empathy gap. There's more males between the ages of 20 and 35 living in their parents' basements today than ever before in history. Education has had a massive shift in just the leadership. So like we walked in here, Jeff, tell them about your observation
Yes,
on the wall over here.
I walk in, and since I've worked here, so I wanted to see some familiar faces, and I just go up to the faculty picture, and there's 40, maybe 50 faces, and there's
So that's our faculty picture.
4 males in the pictures.
So you look at the College of Education's public, parochial, and the percentage of people that are interested in going into education. And the now, my daughter, my wife, lifelong educators, they're great educators. And when you walk into the school and you see 18 teachers and 1 man, you cannot help but have a feminization of the environment. And I don't mean they're trying to make feminists out of the kids. I mean, you have a super strong female input in the culture of the organization. So a 6th grader who's really struggling with his identity, or where am I going to go, or he's really wrestling with something, and he looks around for leadership, and he doesn't see strong male leadership in that environment. So, and that's happening. I see our friend back there who's 13.
Yeah.
You know, and you're seeing that as well, right? So yeah. You had your hand up before, and I buzzed right by you.
I was just.
Oh, you wanted to see this slide?
You're good.
Okay. Comment?
I grew up going to a Lutheran school, and from grades 3 through 8, I had all male teachers. It was pretty unusual. And then my vocation to start with was I went on into elementary education.
Yeah.
I had that model, and
Yeah.
I taught 1st grade over here before I went on into my work as a psychologist, and I think that I've seen that flip, so much. From when I went into school to become a psychologist, half the class was male and half the class was female, and now graduate programs, if you have 4 or 5 out of 25, maybe 4 or 5 males at the most.
Yeah. So there was a really funny movie years ago came out called Failure to Launch.
Yeah.
But all the research around failure to launch is not very funny.
Yeah.
It's pretty serious, really serious, and the impact that it has. Let me share just one more bit of recent research that I've read, and then we're going to ask you to have some discussion time on this, which is that when the results of, like, let's say that Jeff is married and self-employed, and not an example of this, but let's say he's the 34-year-old who's still living in his parents' basement. He's having a hard time getting a job. Females that want to have a family and have kids would look at that young man and go, not for me. I think that that's one of the reasons why the average age of marriage is going up. Females still want to have families, they still want to be married, they still want to have kids, and it's harder and harder for them to find that. And then as males get less and less education, it narrows their field of opportunity socially, economically, health. It's pretty dramatic, and that is happening here and other countries as well.
Some of that have to do too, though, with the idea of lengthening of adolescence. Like you used to be, okay, you go to college, this is when you actually become an adult. Now it's become essentially, you're functionally adolescent until you're 25, 26 years old.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how many of you are here because you're involved in some type of youth or men's or young men's ministry. So maybe half of you. And the others are like, you're curious, you've got your own thing going on with your own kids, or, so, yes.
Children's ministry, actually, wanting to know how to connect the dad
Okay.
to these kids
Okay.
from birth
Yeah.
through fourth grade, where I think we gotta get it early. I was hoping to hear
Yeah.
that. How
So-
are we gonna connect them?
Thank you. So our promise today was like, not that we just talk about how bad it is, but that you can walk out of here with solutions around, for ministry, all right? So what we would like for you to do, just for a couple of minutes, is find somebody in the room. So with a group of 2 or 3. And first, what we're going to talk about is, we want you to define the reality in your own ministry. So what are you seeing in your own ministry that are challenges for you, concerns for you? Okay, so find a friend, brief conversation around, let's define the reality of what your ministry is like around that male or family issue. Okay?
Y'all heard my
Kids 13.
Yeah, I talked to him before.
I think we got it.
I came with my she's in work a lot. Why'd you come to
I do adult Bible study.
Frankly,
in church.
my dad's not.
You're in it, yeah. But I don't really deal with
Do you
the
know him?
kids.
Yeah, I see him
I mean,
once.
I'm not the kid whisperer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Brave kid. Yeah. So timeline, we're fine. It's very.
I'm fortunate, most of them have to have really good relationships.
Maybe we should just learn this in the
Just
future.
hoping to get a little bit of
Having people come, it's not about their job, it's about what's happening.
better relationships with.
They came because they saw the topic, and like these two guys.
I think the whole thing, the shortage too, is like our sister, she's.
That's fine.
Waiting and looking, like you were saying.
Yes, yes, and that's, yes,
A guy in the family.
Yeah, I think that'll hit on.
yes, yeah.
They want to be.
They got their stuff together.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
So we need to hear what they're learning here.
Jordan Peterson, that
Go with, and you try and tell them what was it like for me.
said
Yeah.
that 30 women will instinctively begin to look for a partner that can raise kids.
30's old.
That's when they're desperate. That's when desperate. That's when the clock is just rolling down fast.
I'm
I
gonna
see
hit
that.
the B button.
And it's really interesting. My oldest son was married at 23, very responsible. And the other two waited
Later on, Fletcher wrote that up there. And then later on,
part of it was
come back
Brad, but also part of it was
B for black.
the culture.
B for Becker.
Basically said, well, you know, yeah, you want to get married when you're 20.
That's such a dumb problem, though. Like, I would, if I could go back, I would get married even earlier.
Me too.
The bottom line is, after 23, you don't learn
All the smells of all the breakfast sandwiches.
Well, we like, literally, you were just out of college, my wife was still out of college.
that was the tradition.
Well, like, we grew up together, like, we became adults together, like, we started paying bills, we started doing everything, but like, so we weren't like these two separate people, like, we literally, like, we grew up together.
Part of it is the confusion around the because they're told they're supposed to have it all.
What you did.
Yeah.
Have a career, be a great mom, start a great wife. All those things that sometimes together, something has to go. Body have to sacrifice. And women do. My wife's well become a retired counselor. And 93% people outside the U.S.
That's okay. Something else won out.
And it takes about twice as many OBGYNs to run the practices as it would any other practice. Because they're all women and they're
I'm
all
gonna write this stuff down.
getting married and having kids. because they
What they're
believe
gonna do, like their learnings from this. We don't have to write that
and they will
stuff down.
sacrifice part of their career. Whereas
I do sometimes at that very end of my workshop, we don't talk about the most
Well, that's the other
important
thing too, I mean, the society's changed so much to where we've gotten away from it like that. It should be the ministry of the woman. We could do that, or if you command the word, say,
we don't have another model.
Okay. 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes.
We don't have another model, and so I'm talking to men There are some that are fortunate enough to be in good marriages. This place is so well researched. And others, they don't know what it looks like.
So it's just never that, like, yeah, I want that father-son relationship, and now that son, that's great.
Right.
Yeah, when I first came, we had like leadership talk, like,
Then it shows up.
like top, like 6th through 8th graders who were like, they wanted to be better leaders. So they would meet, do like 45 minutes. I don't know if it was once or twice a month before school on Thursdays, and she would just bring
I have a staff of
leaders,
basically
coaches.
5 women.
You know, it's so easy to find people who are
And I meet
business leaders, nonprofit leaders. Yeah, I would love to come talk to kids, so.
Makes sense to me, but it doesn't work for us. And we have to balance this right now. Because, and they'll say, well, that's cultural. No, it's not cultural. It's our brain.
Well, and I'm wondering, has the society made people more needy? You know what I mean? Like, I don't remember my dad, just like, if I wanted to hang out with my dad, I went and did what my dad was doing. He was doing yard work, I went to go hang out with my dad. My dad didn't say, all chores are put off, let me run you around to this game, that game, we're gonna just play all day. Well, it's not a thing.
Affluence has changed roles. We have few options.
It's like growing
And today, it's like the parents actually think that they're, you need to run their kids to 10,000 things. What they need to do is put together. But on a farm, I did one thing. That is your life.
It's harder to
Work together. Or
do
business.
than to,
That doesn't
you know,
exist.
think about it. Okay, let's come back to Heather here. All right. So tell us a little bit about what you learned from your people in your group here. What's the reality look like in the ministry situation?
You wanna speak for us?
Sure.
Yeah, so we're gonna. Okay, so let's give us what you were learning from the people in your group about what the ministry context is like, so.
It feels like when we work with people, there's two types. One are people who have fairly functional father-son relationship, and that moves down to the next generation, and those are pretty easy. And then other people who are really, really struggling because it just keeps spawning out more and more dysfunction.
Yeah.
We also just, we kind of went off and started talking about difficulty in this thing you said about the trying to find good partners and someone who matches, because the culture has shifted so much that there's no givens anymore.
Right.
And, yeah.
Yeah, good, thank you. How about back here? What anything else about the ministry context?
The best thing I heard was from Gray, and I'd like him to speak for himself, because this is a well-spoken young man. And I want you to share with them what you share with us about your own situation and about your insight at your age now, what you think is going on in homes, because that made an impact on me.
So I think that, yes, a lot of the problem is that there is no strong male figure in the family. And of course, that's really prevalent, all the statistics you showed. But I think a lot of it is also just how the kids are being raised, how they're being brought up. Because I don't really have a dad at this point. All I have is my mom and my sister. And I look at where I am right now, and I look at where people my age are right now. And I think to myself, well, what's the difference? And my mom has a lot to speak about this. We're really big on sharing these things with people. But I hope we're doing something right. I mean, I'm here right now. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gray and I talked beforehand too, and shared some really important points. You know, and one of the things that Jeff and I want to be clear about is we don't want to beat up on single moms. I mean, single moms are doing heroic work, oftentimes working extra jobs, long hours, and trying to fill the role that husband and wife would normally fill. And so that extra pressure of time and emotion and relationship is really intense, really intense. And so God bless those single moms that are out there and putting their best foot forward every day. So thank you, thank you. Yeah. Other ministry context things? Yes. So where are you guys from, by the way? You came a little later.
We're from Victory Church and Christian Academy in Chula Vista.
Chula Vista, okay, thanks.
We have a K through 12 school, and we were just remarking that it's striking that the number of dads that are significantly involved in their sons' lives at our school, those sons are involved in sports.
Yes.
Young men that aren't involved in sports, as an educator, I see moms more than I see dads. The only dads I see are dads of athletes that are invested in their education and how they're doing. Everyone else, it's their mom, which is kind of interesting.
It's interesting, yeah. I don't think I've ever heard anybody put it quite like that. So if it's arts or theater or whatever, it's probably...
I was in our by-circuit meeting, and I asked all the other pastors, how many of you were involved in drama, public speaking, debate, leadership in high school? Nobody raised their hand except me. I said, how many of you are involved in sports? Everybody raised their hand.
Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah.
Surprises me.
But it's an interesting dynamic. Yeah. Go ahead.
My son's a senior in high school. He's a dancer, and he loves drama and music and all that stuff. And we go to dance competitions, and it's like he's in an all-boys hip-hop dance group, right? So it's like me and their dads, and then it's just a bunch of ladies, right? And that's all it is. But it's so like everybody loves their dance group. Like they are just amazing, and they always come up to him, and it's a gap. You're right. And there's just. Why can't we praise that? Like, that's his thing, he loves it.
I have that exact same thing. Give me a high five. Yes, I have that exact same thing.
And music was my saving grace when I was 16, 18, 20 years old as well. So other ministry context things for you? Yes.
One of the things we mentioned in knowing situation, like, it's a small, he's principal at a small rural school in a very small town in Nebraska. And I'm in Oklahoma, right outside Oklahoma City, so we're in Oklahoma City, so but what you were saying, like as far as what you see happening, you have the exact same reasons, the exact same things going on between a town of like 250, 300 people in Nebraska and a town of the 25th largest city in the U.S. It's not too many things seem to cross.
Yeah, the same issues, just on different scales.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like,
Sure.
they do the same things I do with, just.
Where are you in Nebraska?
Just outside of school.
Oh, I'm from Northport.
Oh, good. I grew up in Ely.
We have a Lincoln back here.
You guys have lunch together, okay? So this, I mean, it frames the issue pretty well, and if you're a youth worker or a pastor or a teacher, principal, or just a parent who loves their kids and is concerned about them, it's really, there's also this dynamic that I've seen in people that the higher the stress level goes, the tougher it is for them to take a step back and get a fresh perspective. Stress causes us to dig in, and when we dig in, it's like we can only see what's right in front of us. It's really, really tough. So we want to transition to, we don't leave here all depressed and everything. So we want to transition to some really hopeful things and hope you take that with you. So we're going to jump back 20 years, okay? I was 44, Jeff was 14. I had a job where I worked too much, I partied too much, I traveled too much. I was not a good dad. Early in my life, I discovered pornography. That became from interesting to fascination to addiction. It was a mess. My life was a mess, and it was totally in secret, except for the partying and traveling too much part of it. And I got sick of myself, and eventually got the courage and the help and answered prayers to get honest about that. And so I sat with my wife and told her that story. And if you've ever been in that environment or know anybody who has, it's like pouring gas on a fire, And it was unbelievable. I cannot convey the intensity, the anger, the broken trust, and all of that. Several days later, my wife and I sat down with Jeff and his sister. Jeff was 14, Anna was 16 at the time, and told them what was going on in our life. So give them a little picture of what that was like for you as a teenager.
So yeah, being 14, I still vividly remember sitting in our living room, and I don't remember really anything that he said. I just vividly remember my mom crying, and him hurting my mom, which means you hurt me. I remember hearing about porn, and I was like, well, I'm 14, I'm kind of grown into manhood, but like, don't all dads do that? Like, if I go to a sleepover with my buddies, like, we would go find the VHS or the magazine or whatever, and so I just thought that was somewhat normal, like growing into manhood. And so that didn't truly affect, like, I didn't understand the correlation between relationship, marriage, and what that meant, but I was just like, you hurt my mom, so you hurt me. And so that started the distance, the separation, because again, this was all behind closed doors. I didn't understand it. Yes, he traveled, but for me he was still my dad. We'd still go play catch. He was still active in my life. But it was kind of like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. And that's kind of where the piece is shattered then at that point.
And so, at that time in our family, there's so much anger, really difficult conversations. And in hindsight now, I'm still married to the same woman, 38 years, blessed by that. I realize not all marriages make it, and some of them probably shouldn't because of the depths of the problem, lack of repentance or abusive nature of that sort of thing. If they can't work through that, that's another story. Our story's a little different than that. But in hindsight, what I saw in Jeff was three really important things. He was really angry, rightfully so. He was afraid. Are they going to get divorced? Will I be embarrassed? Will my friends find out about this? Will I have to go to a different school? Are we going to go broke? We're going to move? I have to have different teams or whatever. And he was alone. I still remember this vividly. When that conversation ended, my daughter got up and went down the street and poured out her heart to her best friend. He went to his room and closed the door. And our research shows that girls tend to be more resilient in these difficult situations. And it doesn't always work out that way. But I think in general, when you lighten your load by sharing your hard times, it's a really important thing. When you carry it by yourself, it doubles the load. And that's where he was. And I think that if you could kind of keep that little formula of angry, afraid, alone, that's what's happening in about half of all of the homes in your congregation, in your community across the country today. So what were a couple of things that were the most helpful for you?
So I think the first thing that, not just for me, but for our family, we call it the 3 H's in the book. It's honesty, help, humility. And first is honesty. And I think most importantly, my dad had to get honest with himself. He had to get honest with my mom, his wife, and we had to get honest collectively together, what are we going to do about this? We had to get help. And I think that my dad put it to best is, we have, between the four of us, we have 8 college degrees, so we're not, uneducated individuals, but they sought help, and my dad still goes to, recovery program meetings to this day, and but we had to get help. And we'll go into further depth of what that meant, but for me, help was just connecting with someone. When we're going to talk about how, it takes a village to raise a child.
Which I always thought was kind of a joke until we ended up in this situation. And then I realized how critical the village was because he didn't want to talk to me. He didn't want to see me. He didn't trust me.
That's very true. Honesty, help, and humility, right? There has to be a humbleness. There has to be a vulnerability about you that we don't know everything, that we do need help, that there's not much that I remember about those years, but I do remember just coming home, Dad sleeping on the couch. Coming home, Dad sleeping on the couch. Coming home, Dad sleeping on the couch, or him coming home from recovery meetings, and then, hey, why don't we talk about this? Hey, let's have a conversation about something. And it was hard. It was vulnerable. It was, and at the immediate time, it was Dad's doing this because it's recovery program homework, and now he's just checking the box. But conversation after conversation after conversation, we started building that wall of trust back up. And that taught me kind of how to open up, how to be vulnerable, how to be empathetic. And he says that I forgave him. I don't remember saying that, but that's kind of where it started. And then it was very little by little, week by week, month by month, we started building that trust level back up.
I remember this was months down the road. He came to me one day. I still remember standing in the kitchen, and he's like, "Okay, I get it. I know why you. I know why." He was talking about why I got honest with my wife. He goes, "I know why you did that, and I know that was important for you, because you never could have been a guy with any integrity if you hadn't gotten honest about where you were. But I'm still really pissed at you." And so I was like, "I'll take it," because that was a breakthrough. Because the trust was like here, and then it's like building up interest in a bank account over a lifetime. Then you go to Vegas and blow it all in one instant. Well, that's what happened to the trust in our environment. So it doesn't come back like a springboard. It comes back like it did in the first place, of months and months and months and months and months of consistency and doing what you say you're going to do. Also, I had to be willing that honesty and getting help. I had to learn how to get out of my own comfort zone and talk about things that were uncomfortable for me. As an addict, I had lost the ability to have like really strong emotional connections. I didn't even realize that. And so the parents and the kids who are going through this right now, they're wrestling with how do I talk about these things that, usually we talk about sports and you have your homework done and what's the weather going to be like tomorrow so you wear a coat, whatever, which none of that really matters in hindsight. None of that really matters. So, honesty, help, humility. Thank God there was a youth worker at our church who didn't know what was going on with Jeff, but he knew something was going on with Jeff. And James really put his arm around Jeff at that time. And Jeff found his outlet through sports. And there were times when he was like really off the chain with me, and he's like, "I'm going to go work out," which was because he could have just as easily gone down the other street and been in a gang, doing drugs, or whatever, So another interesting thing that Jeff said just a little bit ago was that we would go to our friends, and they would all have porn. So from my childhood, as porn was horrible, evil, and it is horrible and evil, it's now mainstream. So many TV shows, so many movies, there's jokes, and as soon as Hollywood starts to joke about a topic, it's mainstream. And so for him to I didn't even know that was like a really bad thing, So, it's not his fault, he didn't know it was a really bad thing. The entire culture is telling him that it's mainstream. So a person I know who does a lot of research on this is like, I was on a college campus recently, and we're polling college guys to try to find a baseline for who's looking at pornography. There's no baseline. They're all looking at pornography. They're all. So the baseline is 100%. So that's where you're starting from. So, and other things as well. So, we talked about this triangle of honesty, help, and humility. All right. Jeff did his master's, the criminal justice master's, on after-school programs in the Quad Cities area. And I read the dissertation and went, wow, there's two things in there that are making these after-school programs really, really strong. One was consistent presence of adults, males and females, who will show up on a regular basis and be there for those kids. Whether they're related, whether they have college degrees, whether they're rich or black or what, it doesn't matter. They're there, they're consistent for the lives to build relationship. And the second thing was skill building, doing something. Bounce a ball, sew, art, cook, hike, camp out. So if you think about those things, how do you build that into your ministry? And in an environment where the dads maybe just don't even want to be present. How do you build that in? So how do you go back to your group of new friends for conversation and think, how can we take another look at our ministry And to build that in, so that way as the young men and women, as they come in, that there is that honesty, help, humility. Kids don't want watered down worship, they don't want watered down youth group. They want vulnerable, they want honest, they want transparent. Tell them the truth about what's going on, they can handle that. So, with that in mind, we're going to give you a few minutes to discuss, and then we're going to come back and debrief that, because by that time, it'll be about time to leave the room here, okay? So, based on our conversation, what could you build in to, I think I have, rather than me asking a really long question, I think I have it in my presentation here. So, based on what we've been discussing, how do you build that consistency into your ministry environment, your process? Okay? Give you a few minutes to discuss that, and then we'll come back. What's that?
If we want to, we could talk about, bring up like relating to the sports thing about fathers. Fathers within sports. Yes. It doesn't talk about Imago Dei, but if we
That's okay.
speak about it.
Yeah, whatever your instincts are saying.
Well, yeah, if we have time.
Yeah. So I think if we wrap this, debrief this.
But that's our natural protection.
And then ask them what we're supposed to do.
Because we can't do that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, questions, and wrap up, and it'll be 10 plus.
So that's what this asking for.
Actually, we got a slow start. But I feel like that question maybe not.
Otherwise, if I always.
Go ahead, what were you going to say?
No, I don't, I mean.
No, we do in the box.
I'd be interested.
You know, something else, I think the cycle they're spread out like that. I think that doesn't help them feeling emotionally connected.
Sure. I also think,
I met at Rob Dial's thing that you were shoulder to shoulder. Or round tables.
round tables,
Yeah.
but I'm also, it's, I think that it's an interesting top, like, it's not something you open up about.
Yeah.
But I think the more they realize that, oh, we're all here because same thing, like you said, like, you know, whether you're from Oklahoma City or from small town Nebraska, we're all the same.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a little.
I wonder if that guy's from Messiah. He probably knows Charlie.
Huh.
Very difficult learning how to just reflect on what it was because that gave me something to do. I mean, I was learning all these skills, and it's constant. It doesn't help with me personally. As I was doing it, because I thought, is this helping? Is this helping? It doesn't well. Actually, that makes something else. And he says, Dad, let's talk. We'll go for a walk. And we're excited about it. Just dumps his soul.
I mean, what did the counselor do to get the...
Well, he did a thing called family life skills before that was he needed other men besides me. That was the key. And because the counselor was there too. And almost always this another way involved.
I think that can be so helpful.
I don't know why I never thought about this, so like culture stuff with teams.
Yeah, great.
You know, I always talk about the consistency of doing it. He was talking about those guys and just living in something that made me think about it. Rancho Solano, his coach does every Monday, Manday Monday.
Manday Monday?
Manday Monday.
What is that? What do they do?
Just talk about
Oh.
so it has nothing to do about basketball, it has nothing to do about their culture.
What I need to know is, I don't.
Give them an environment to just say what's going on.
I get frustrated.
Oh, wow.
And I say, I say things that I don't.
I think about that.
Just because I'm
Still,
fed
there
up,
was,
you know.
I remember when
And
some
that's making
guys came over to take
still wrong.
Anna and Emily out. I remember the guy went to the bathroom, when he peed, I remember who it was. And I went in there later and weird. He's like, oh, we're in the toilet. I said something to him, like,
You just get them off the internet.
whatever you tell you, you're supposed to like clean that. You know, shake hands, look people in the eye, you know, open the door for somebody.
That's another thing. Because we don't have any. There's a guy, Buzz Williams.
These are our words.
South Carolina. He's teaching his players how to shake hands. He's like, you're going to meet media, you're going to meet agents, you're going to meet other coaches. So literally he's teaching 20-year-olds how to shake hands.
Well, and if they come from urban poor, which is where the vast majority of those kids come from, nobody's ever told them about urban poor. Yeah, well, and a lot of white kids too. I shouldn't just say urban poor.
Of course, they jump
Okay.
over all the fields.
He's going good. We should probably, I think that clock's about 5 minutes fast. It's 9:35, 4 minutes fast.
I think we have that common.
Just one more minute.
You see what I'm saying? Sure. Yeah, but and then trying to evolve the main goals.
What's that?
He's trying, he just takes out the wall. Music he listens to.
I have a call today with
I have a guy that I'm working with.
head of recruiting or something for Wyndham, one of the Wyndham clients. But she's like, she won't do the calls on weekends, so like it's 30 minutes and like as soon as we're off, it just clicks off and like goes to the next thing. So it's kind of like you're really getting old because I know your mind is so engulfed in work. Everyone else has been like, oh, my weekends are Tuesday, Wednesday. Like I'd really like to do it on a Tuesday or Wednesday so I can really just like soak it in, or we can talk about work stuff if I need to, and like the environment.
Does she manage a bunch of people or no?
Yes.
Did I ever show you that worksheet that I give some people that has like 10 sections on it? And if they'll ask themselves those questions in between time, they'll show up a lot more frequently.
Yeah, I think you have like, what does success mean to you, or what does success look like to you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Thank you. So give us just one or two things from each group, just one or two things that you thought were insights, helpful, ahas, whatever. So how about the French from California back there?
Just the intentionality behind it, because in terms of things of consistency, having our kids, we don't have after-school programs, we have people, Tim one of those, who's there, we have other people who are there, but we're not as a ministry saying, okay, intentionality, what are we doing, so it's not, he's there, but it's informal, let's gather around skill, but actually making it so that broader people know and that it's there, and finding, recruiting more people into that, where you're not just providing a skill, but the investment of time into life, because we've got guys who are still, right now we're starting in the men's ministry, we're going to be focusing on the roots of these, how do we biblical, male penning. But then also we have a lot of kids in our school, we have a K through 12 who are in terms of, we need almost like a triage unit, because they're just going through so much at home.
Yeah. By the way, each of the chapters in the book ends with about 4 or 5 questions. And just the other day, somebody said to you,
Yep, he was.
they use the book as like a primer, as a sort of foundation. These are like starter questions when the kids come in. So they use those questions to like get the conversations up. They're like, we don't know what to ask them. So anyhow, and the chapters in the book are, I mean, it's about money, it's about relationships, it's about Imago Dei, about identity, sex.
Yeah. So I was he was telling me specifically, because we were talking about the pornography stuff, and he's a youth group leader within the LDS ministry, and he just said, so here's literally out of the chapter, let's talk about sex, like, what was the sex talk life with your dad, if there was any? What would be helpful to hear when you were an adolescent? What did you learn incorrectly about sex when you were young? And da 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 da. He goes, so it's a lot easier for me as a leader to not sometimes lean into these harder conversations because I'm reading the script more so than just having it off the top of our head.
And the back 10% of the book is we took each chapter and did mini devotion. So if you want to not create all that yourself, and they're 10th Power Publishing, back in the corner over there, they are a publisher, so if you want to get a copy. Jim Gallen in the back corner out there, their books are over there if you'd like to pick up a copy, or you can go to tenderlions.org and you can find it there as well. So, okay, I got how about back here, ministry ideas?
We just talked about the importance of relationships and building trust, and so that when they do need help, that they know it's not just, it's one thing to say, I'm here for you if you need me, but it's another thing for them to know and trust that they have that person to come and talk to if they need.
Yeah. How about up here, anything new or after that? How about you, Robert?
I think we talked about how it really is a process, because our default position is as men is to just kind of, be bottled up and go to the room and shut our door and not say anything. So it's kind of, pulling teeth. And also, it's our natural nature to rebel against the father figure, right? Since the beginning of time, we rebelled against God, we rebelled against our fathers. So
Yeah, it's almost predictable.
so.
Thank you. Yeah. How about back
I
here?
just thought about connecting parents with mentors that could mentor them their parenting issues.
Okay. Other things?
Grandparents could be a source too.
Yeah.
I like that.
Anything to add or? No. Okay. How about back here?
I heard you guys 2 years ago, and I just so appreciate what you guys talk about. I haven't done anything in men's ministry with the stuff that I got from you guys 2 years ago, and I'm going to blame COVID,
Go ahead.
I think.
We haven't done much in the last 2 years either.
Exactly.
Interviews and some
Exactly.
podcasts.
It's really, in fact, I've seen, we had a men's event, an annual men's event at our church that has kind of become a grandfather, father, son kind of event, which is kind of cool, but haven't taken the next step to developing something more specific with fathers and sons.
Yeah. It's related to what Robert said too, is that we found that by us simply having the courage or whatever to talk about our situation, that little bit of vulnerability is really permission giving for other people. Otherwise, you just want to stay in your environment. Okay, I'll come and I'll kind of stand on the outsides. But once you see someone else say, this is me, my story, it's not exactly like yours, but my story identifies with yours as well. So.
Well, earlier you guys were talking about fathers being emotionally absent. I mean, I'm in the home, I try to be, but I didn't grow up with the touchy-feely and the, you get a hug every day and your dad tells you he loves you before he tucks you in. I mean, I always knew my parents loved me, but it wasn't, I don't know, I mean, how do you learn how to be something that you don't even know? I don't even understand how to do that. I mean, I try to connect with my kid as best I can,
Sure.
and I try to make it an intentional to tell him I love him and this, that, and the other, but it doesn't seem to work right. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like being told to fly a jet and you don't even know how to get in a plane. I mean, it's like I don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, there's something there that's going on either with you or with him or some combination of that. My observation is, and I'm not a psychologist, so it takes with a super grain of salt, maybe a truckload of salt, okay, is that you're really intense about this. I can see you love your kid to the bottom of your soul, but there's just a lot of, that anxiety in you, maybe transferring over. And so how can you step back and take a fresh perspective? Man, there's no doubt that he loves you too. I mean, he may say he hates you, but I guess, you know.
I'm gonna blame the intensity on my Italian genes, so. I'm half Sicilian, so.
Well, actually, let me speak on that, so as a mental performance coach, I work with a lot of teenage athletes, and so for me, I hear a lot of, I'm the safe space for athletes, whether that's, we just talked about what's happened over COVID, and we've all seen the rise of suicide, depression, anxiety within teenage athletes or students. So I hear a lot from all sides, what the coach wants of the athlete, what the parent wants of the athlete, what the student or the athlete wants of whatever. So from a teenage side, I would say almost even, and I would say this to coaches, I would say this to parents, I say this to athletic directors, is have any of us, for whatever your ministry is, have we asked, what do you guys need? And I think a little bit of it is maybe a little bit of, we have to open up and show the vulnerability, and like you said, is open up that pathway, open up that portal of, give them the opening to maybe just be a little bit more honest. I mean, I've had to do that with my own wife, like, hey, what do you need from me? And it's almost like, well, my love language is physical touch, but if she doesn't give me the physical touch, but hers is words of affirmation or acts of service, I need to learn how to do this. Not beat the door down of do physical touch. It's, no, I need to relearn the love language of what's best for her, for us to work together. So maybe it's a little bit for all of us. If I was a youth minister, what do you guys see? Obviously, what I learned when I was 13 to 16 years old is a lot different than what you learned 13 to 16 years old. So opening up that pathway or that portal of communication for them to give you guys some ideas as well, I think.
So if there's like one thing you want to do different, where's the hope in this? What's one thing you might do different? What's one thing you might do differently when you get back?
I think being more intentional, I'm not a father quite yet, but being more intentional with the college kids I work with, like, to actually go do something with them and just open up doors to actually talk about stuff, because I'm so good at just saying, like, oh yeah, sometime later, just pushing it down the road, because it's not something that's like super comfortable to do, but something that needs to get done.
What did you say that coach does something called Monday Manday?
Mondays. Mandate Mondays, and he says we don't talk about basketball, we don't talk about our culture, we don't talk about wins or losses. I teach them how to tie a tie. I teach them how to shake hands and look people in the eyes. I teach them how to build a resume. But also I would say this, I say this to a lot of people, is I give the analogy of if a principal calls you into the office, you're going to be like, oh crap, what did I do? But if he says, hey, every Monday at 3 p.m., come to the office with some ideas, you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, this is what Brian says about me, and we should be doing this better, to organically grow this. And so every, Mandate Monday, those guys knew, hey, we're going to work on ourselves. So that I keep hearing the word intentionality, consistency, prioritizing it. It's just got to be consistent.
Yeah. Other things, something you want to take back and do different. Anything?
I just want to throw this out there, that as the men who have been the core part of our men's ministry age, does anybody have an idea of how to, for active fathers age 25 to 50, how would you even go about getting their ideas about what would be a solid direction for men's ministry or father-son connection kinds of things?
So where I see it working well, there's resources and leaders that are really concerned about this, and so they provide the environment. It's periodic men's retreat or men's Bible study, or you don't have to have staff. You don't have to have staff for that. You have to have people that care about that, and you provide that environment. And it's really low key.
Like entry level.
Yeah, it's not, it's not this.
Right.
It's like, come on. And,
Right, even Bible study sounds heavy,
well, maybe you don't call it Bible study.
Yeah.
I've been going to a Bible study on Thursday mornings for like 20 years, on and off, I don't
Right.
know, every week. And sometimes we don't get to the Bible.
No, sure, sure.
It's, you know, what else is going on in these men's lives that's really, really important.
Right, right.
So, I think environments where you let people open this space up of what was my relationship like with my dad. And Will came in and I asked him and his dad, I asked Gray about it. Gray, is that right? You know, and immediately, the guy who set up the sound stuff for us, we asked him, what was your boy's life like with your dad? And it just starts a conversation that's, it just goes deep really fast, almost all the time. And you never know what you're gonna get, and that's okay. And we have advice, but we're much more likely to say, well, what's that like for you? What are you gonna do with that? So, yeah. We can talk longer later as well, so. So our time's almost up. You can find us if you want to contact us. Our website's called tenderlions.org. You can email us, you can find the book if you want interviews or workshops or podcasts where we're doing all that stuff in our spare time. If I had to give you a piece of advice, it's never too late to change the way you're doing your ministry or the way you're doing your parenting. And for me, it was when I spent years covering up stuff, being embarrassed, being ashamed, being afraid about what my past was like. And then when I swore myself to secrecy, I think the devil went, I have you now. The devil loves those secrets. And it wasn't until I somehow got that courage to uncover the dark stuff that all the energy went out of that. And I found the seeds to the new life with my relationship with Jeff and my wife and my daughter and others. The seeds to the new life were under all that dark stuff. And that, by the way, it got a lot harder before it got better. But it got better. It got a lot better. So being willing to go to the hard space. What would you say?
Chapter 13, time matters. Time matters. Spending it, whether you are the biological father or not. And this is how I end every story or podcast or whatever. It's the 7-minute story. And
It doesn't take you 7 minutes to tell.
no. I'm 34, so 25 years ago, I still vividly remember my dad would set that timer for 7 minutes, and he'd put the patties on the grill. And he had 7 minutes, and I had 7 minutes to play catch with him, throw the football, scrape the knees, play horse with him, do whatever. But to me, still 25 years later, I still remember exactly what that timer looks like. And 7 minutes goes off, he flips the burgers, I have 7 more minutes. And so if there's anything I can say to you guys is just time truly matters. And whether it's 7 minutes or 7 hours, it's the investment in time.
How about if I end with just a brief prayer and then you can find your way. So thank you very much for coming. Let's pray. Good and gracious God, we're thankful for this environment. We ask that you would put your arms around these men and women who care so deeply for their families and for their ministry, that you would give them guidance, you would give them clarity, you would surround them with resources. We know that when we ask, you answer. And so we ask today that you would surround them with that type of care and help that they need, that they would bring help and healing to many and bring you praise and glory in the process. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Bless you guys.
Thank you guys.
And your families.